us. It is a great pleasure to have a distinguished guest here today for a discussion around some of the goals and objectives the United States needs to achieve in order to continue the excellence of fundamental research, spur the economy, improve STEM diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to solve the societal grand challenges facing humanity. Our distinguished guest is Professor Roger Beacky. He is a member of the National Science Board, and he was chair of the Vision 2030 National Science Board Strategy Committee that wrote the document Vision 2030. He's also a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and he was appointed by President Obama as director of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture in the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the period 2009 to 2011. He was founding president of the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center for the period 1999 to 2009, and we're very proud to have him as a member of the College of Natural Science Advisory Committee. He's also a Spartan with his PhD from Michigan State University in plant pathology. A second guest was going to join us, Professor Sean Jones, who is now head of the Directorate of Mathematical and Physical Sciences at the NSF. However, there was an accident that Roger can elucidate a little bit more, so he's unable to join us. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Roger to start telling us about the Vision 2030.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Phil, for the invitation and for the opportunity to present a couple of things today that I hope will be of interest to the team, to the group. I was pleased to be appointed to the National Science Board under President Obama and finished my first year term and just joined, just reappointed by this administration and decided to accept the challenge again, hoping for the changes which occurred. So I'll go from there into a presentation that was developed for the National Science Board to use in its presentations of the Vision 2030. I'm really pleased to be back here again to do this and look forward to discussions with you. So I'm going to I will share the document and then hopefully it will show. Oops, hang on a second. In my haste, I didn't return to the top. So does that show us a full screen, Phil?
Yep, looks good.
Very good. So as Phil said, I was a member of the Vision 2030 Task Force and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and the college. Fond memories of being at the Plant Research Lab and of course took the biochemistry right across the street. And back in the day when we were the two that were the farthest south on campus and felt a bit isolated, but still enjoyed it and enjoyed the isolation. Being able to present to you a bit about the Vision 2030 report is a pleasure. Unfortunately, Dr. Jones is unable to join us today because last evening saw a failure of a major set of cables which supported a 900-ton data collection set instrumentation over top of the 350-foot diameter Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. The cable broke, was weakened, but before it could be repaired, it came crashing down and destroyed the instrument. And that's in Dr. Jones' space in his directorate. And he apologizes, but is in an emergency meeting, understandably. I'll do my best to convey the message from the NSF director, Dr. Panchanathan. If you don't know Panch, I hope you'll get to see him sometime and here or there or listen to him. He's really an enthusiastic and new director. We're very pleased and proud to have him. He was on the board, was appointed the same year I was, and by Mr. Obama, and is really taking hold of the directorate. One of the things of the agency, one of the things you'll learn is that as a member of the board, he also participated in the development of Vision 2030 and concurs with its outcome and its roadmap. And we expect a good collaboration between the NSF as an agency and the National Science Board as an oversight board of directors. It was developed to provide a view of where the NSB and the NSF see the future of research, education, and innovation in the US and globally. Provides a vision of where we want to be by 2030 and lays out the actions that the board, the NSF, and others can take to achieve the vision that, to ensure that America remains a global leader in science and engineering. Questions and discussion are, of course, welcome and will provide the board, us, an opportunity to learn more about how you respond to the vision. While we all share the common goal of ensuring that the US remains a global innovation leader, the means to achieve goals that are set out in the Vision 2030 are likely to vary amongst us. And we want to hear from various constituencies. The board recently formed a vision implementation working group, of which I am a member. And we want to be sure that we're engaging with key members of the S&E ecosystem as we begin to implement the roadmap actions of the vision. Now, our goal was to write a vision that was big and bold and actionable. And I hope you get the sense that we're enthusiastic about moving forward to face the challenges that will face American research and development in the coming decade and beyond. The board's work on Vision 2030 reflects the two dimensions of our statutory responsibilities. The board was formed about 50 years ago as the agency formed and was mandated by congressional action. Its NSF governance role is to work with the NSF director to pursue NSF's mission, identify critical issues for NSF's future, and to help establish the agency policies. And a second role is to act as S&E advisors, science and engineering advisors to administration and to Congress. I'll use the phrase S&E quite liberally during my presentation because in fact, it's an agency that sponsors research and engineering, as you all know, as well as in other acts of science and education. Well, in creating this report, we listened to stakeholders from around the country and within the NSF by holding 12 listening sessions with individuals from some 70 institutions, including minority serving institutions. We met with students, seasoned and early career researchers, administrators, inventors, and with representatives of academic and scientific associations, as well as the private sector. We asked participants what they saw as the emerging trends that affect the practice of science and engineering and what they see coming down the pike in the next 10 years, and what they believe that we as a nation and as NSF would want to have done by 2030 to adapt to these trends and to continue to lead the world in S&E. We combine this collective feedback with data that from the Science and Engineering Indicators 2020. I hope that many of you rely on the S&E indicator, S&E to mark trends, to see what is happening around the globe and around the US. Because this is the way we determine prevailing trends and crucial areas for research. And this is a slide that came from the S&E indicators. And it shows that science and engineering is now is truly a worldwide enterprise with more players and changing every decade and more opportunities, and of course, more competition and more potential for collaboration as a consequence of that competition. Since 2000, global research and development investments have tripled. And while the US remains a leading player, other countries have seen the benefits of investing in research and education and are following our example. As a result, our share of global R&D investments is declining, as shown in yellow in this figure, from 37% in 2000 to 25%. Much of the rest is in Asia, of course, and we know the investments of China as a major player, in addition to the EU and your other European countries. Now, Vision 2030 underscores that the US must respond to these new realities. In the coming decade, the US will need to adapt its S&E and educational enterprise to keep pace with the globalization of science and engineering, the growth of knowledge and technology in intensive industries, and the demand for STEM talent. The American K through 12 student performance in academics and mathematics is mediocre at best. and stagnant relative to peer nations. And despite some progress, women and underrepresented minorities remain a challenge in many S&E degree programs and as well as in jobs. Yet demand for STEM capable workers continues to grow, driven by international opportunities and competition, and by rapid increases in the number of jobs that require STEM skills. Our nation's future prosperity and security, as well as the creation of opportunity for the next generation of Americans, depends on our investments in our S&E ecosystem. As our country tackles multiple challenges, we must make strengthening our S&E capacity a top priority, and you'll hear this over and over. The board's vision for 2030 is that the US remain the world innovation leader. To that end, we envision a future where the US science and engineering enterprise offers unparalleled opportunities for all American students, researchers, workers, and entrepreneurs, and that we continue to attract the world's best minds and keep them have them stay in the US. The US has made investments in R&D that fuel our innovation and empower our business to succeed globally. And where government, industry, and academia partner and coordinate to deliver R&D priorities and to speed the translation from discovery to innovation. The scientific values modeled by US scientists and engineers, such as openness and accountability, are practiced globally. And finally, we envision a future where the NSF continues to support the best research and people to create knowledge that benefits all of us. These are the priorities that you'll hear explored and expanded in our vision. And as I said earlier, the board is serious about turning this vision into action. And we're in the process of developing an implementation plan that will be acted upon beginning in Q1 of next year. As you know, the US science and engineering ecosystem, built on federally funded fundamental research, has led to innovation in new industries, revolutionized healthcare, promoted peace, and created the mobile digital network and transformed nearly every aspect of American lives. Science and engineering, particularly in fundamental research, must be conducted transparently and openly. And as such, it benefits the entire world. Yet if the US is to ensure a strong economy and our national security, it is vital that a significant share of future scientific breakthroughs and world-changing innovations be made here in the US by US and under US support. In this new era, the National Science Board sees three key questions that we need to address as we look to the future. The first is, how can America keep its fundamental research leadership? Secondly, how can American discoveries continue to empower US businesses and entrepreneurs and to succeed globally? Are we doing a good enough job at ensuring transfer of knowledge? And third, we ask the question, how can the US increase STEM skills and opportunities for all Americans, not just for the few who happen to be on the East Coast or in centers of excellence such as East Lansing? Addressing these questions will require all entities of the US science and engineering ecosystem to be engaged. This ecosystem relies on the integration and cooperation of private industry, academic institutions, and government agencies. In the coming months and years, the NSB looks forward to engaging with all partners in this ecosystem around four elements that are critical to US leadership in science and engineering. The first of these is the practice of science. As we face greater international competition, we must speed the movement of research from the laboratory to product. We also need to be more strategic about investments, embrace new research tools and modalities, foster an inclusive and ethical science and engineering enterprise, and welcome, as well as capitalize on, the globalization of S&E. In the process, we must preserve what works well in our system, while also being open to change and to new possibilities. The second major need is to develop talent. Our nation's greatest resource is its people. To remain competitive, the U.S. must remain a STEM talent powerhouse. To be ready for 2030, the U.S. will need an R&D workforce that pushes the frontiers of knowledge and a much larger STEM-capable U.S. workforce, and many more, and one in which many more Americans than have in the past have science and engineering and technological skills to enable them to thrive in the 21st century job market and to create the new enterprises that will drive our economy. To meet these needs, the U.S. Must both expand domestic talent and to continue to attract global talent. And we have to do more to retain the engagement of both groups. The NSB, as well as the NAS, National Academy, Congress, and industry all recognize that the U.S. must be aggressive about cultivating the fullness of the nation's domestic talent. Science and engineering indicators data show that participation of women and underrepresented groups has increased slowly in science and engineering over the past few decades, as shown in this graphic. But the total S&E workforce has continued to grow faster than we can populate it, than we can provide the training. Progress in creating a diverse and inclusive S&E enterprise has not kept pace with demographic trends or with the increase in centrality of S&E to our economy, national security, and the jobs of the future. This isn't just bachelor's and master's and PhDs, but the whole of the workforce, extending into junior college training and into high schools. Now, leveraging the strength of America's diversity by broadening participation in the U.S. S&E enterprise will be crucial to individual opportunity and to a thriving economy. For our S&E workforce to reflect our nation's population in 2030, to close this talent gap, we must accelerate progress in increasing the participation rates of currently underrepresented groups. This will certainly require an all hands on deck approach, and the NSB welcomes the opportunity to collaborate with stakeholders, including private enterprise, states, and local education groups to develop a more inclusive workforce. The third area that we have to maintain in leadership is, of course, infrastructure. We lost a big piece today in the failure at Arecibo. The world's best talent, including American talent, will go where the S&E opportunities are the greatest. Without the data, the software, the computation, the networking capabilities, as well as state-of-the-science facilities to do the work of science, we won't be competitive. We need to invest in research infrastructure to maintain our global leadership. At the same time, we must also be strategic, leveraging current and future infrastructure to create opportunities for researchers, not just at the leading centers, but in all parts of the country, and at a range of institutions, not just the elite, not just the Big 10, not just the Big 20. Part of this can be achieved by catalyzing regional research hubs and finding ways to link researchers together through larger networks. The idea of broadband for all is a great one. We've talked about it for a decade or more, and we have not yet achieved that. I think this administration is committed, as well as the former administration. The fourth area that we need to excel in is building meaningful partnerships. We must strengthen existing partnerships as the U.S. faces new competition from countries that organize their S&E enterprises much more centrally, as in the example of China. If we are to make the most of our investments in fundamental research, it will be crucial to strengthen interagency coordination and to add more partnerships with the private sector, state governments, and philanthropic organizations than we have in the past. We must also foster international partnerships to encourage collaboration in S&E research and to ensure the provision of research infrastructure that is extremely costly and or requires only one or two such facilities worldwide. We've done that very well through the partnerships that we have. What that also means is we need to build partnerships that engage our same ethic, our same expectation of research, our same method of conduct of research. NSB's roadmap lays out actions that the board will undertake over the next decade to achieve our vision, while partnering with all components of the S&E ecosystem to implement a roadmap. So we've not only developed a vision, but a roadmap for ourselves to focus on in the next decade as a board, and as to bring attention to Congress and to other parts of the S&E ecosystem. The roadmap focuses on these 4 areas: delivering benefits from research, developing talent for America, and expanding the geography of innovation, fostering a global S&E community. Based upon what I said earlier, you shouldn't be surprised at this roadmap. So give me a few minutes and I'll highlight just a few of the roadmap items in some of these in this area. Well, the first roadmap area is delivering the benefits from research. NSB has firmly endorsed the principle that's quoted in the original founding documents for the NSF, that all US funded research and education must further the national interest by contributing to the NSF's mission. NSF, as you know, is the only agency whose sole mission is to support fundamental research across a wide breadth of S&E fields. NSF support for curiosity-driven research has provided the basis for technologies and benefits that could not have been anticipated, many of which could not have been anticipated at the time that initial grant was given. To enhance the return of this investment to US taxpayers and to empower the nation's businesses and entrepreneurs to compete locally, the US must build on the progress from the past decade, improve coordination, speed translation from discovery to innovation, and to create new enterprise, help to create new enterprise. So for our part, the NSB will convene university, industry, and state partners to help understand barriers to and the best practices for establishing meaningful partnerships, not just in name, but really meaningful partnerships, and the translation of fundamental research into useful product or knowledge. This will also inform NSB's ongoing work with NSF in evolving the agency's partnership strategy. So the NSB will work with the NSF senior management to coordinate and to conduct an organizational review of NSF. Now, the goal of this review is to better enable NSF to carry out its basic research mission amid a changing global S&E landscape. This organizational review could also include some potential restructuring of directorates and exploring ways to update and improve or enhance funding models and programmatic offerings. We also want to consider structures that could foster new structures that could foster the translation of NSF funding of discoveries to innovation and position NSF to continue to respond to national priorities. We've seen some of those from this current administration, such as more focus on quantum information science, artificial intelligence, and then using that information as an undergirding or as a superstructure for more and more parts of research across the NSF's mission. As part of delivering benefits from research, NSF plans to consider how NSF's broader impacts criteria could better meet societal needs. This is one to pay attention to. Remember that in the original documents, the NSF was to fund research that had equal weight on science as well as on broader impacts. Will make us all focus in real terms on what our research will lead to and how we, with NSF funding, US taxpayer funding, can achieve both of those goals, not just one. In the next decade, the nation must focus heavily on developing America's STEM talent, including researchers and a STEM-capable workforce at all educational levels. This will indeed require the engagement of all players in the ecosystem. During our work on the vision, we heard from many early career researchers about the need to keep our S&E enterprise attractive and relative to other jobs that a graduate could go to, and the S&E opportunities abroad as well as locally or in the US. In response, the NSB wants to look at what NSF can do to make the conduct of academic research in the US more attractive. This includes exploring ways to improve retention among women and underrepresented groups and ensure that these groups are achieving leadership roles in the S&E ecosystem. We are also interested in exploring ways to fund long-term, non-tenure track researchers and changes to grant structures that could reduce administrative burdens to get more for the investment that the taxpayers give to us. NSB will also be continuing our work on the skilled technical workforce, which some of you have seen, including working with the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics to get better data on this critical part of the STEM capable workforce and how better to prepare those who are engineers and technicians, as well as discovery scientists. Even as the US invests in domestic S&E talent, it must continue to be a talent magnet, attracting and retaining the very best minds from around the globe. Therefore, NSB encourages the adoption of clear and consistent visa policies to foster stability and advance the US enterprise. We've also already heard from the new administration or the next administration that this is a priority also for them. As we seek to expand the STEM capable workforce, we must do more to create STEM-related opportunities and jobs across the country. Empowering American workers and entrepreneurs and businesses will require strategically building capacity and infrastructure across the nation and actively seeding and nurturing innovation clusters. Here you see this part of the board as we visited one of the NEON centers in Colorado in a recent on-site board meeting. NSF will review current NSF strategies to expand access to and training in S&E in every state. This review will be informed by input from state and industry stakeholders, as I mentioned earlier, and identify ways to develop capacity and further establish S&E hubs throughout the country. This will necessarily include looking at whether EPSCoR requires updating and focusing on how NSF's investments in critical research infrastructure, including mid-scale infrastructure, can foster those regional hubs. Our conversations over the past year have stressed the need for more areas of the country to have access to high-speed broadband. Such access would enhance collaboration among researchers and among higher education institutions and provide access to databases and high-performance computing. While our original focus was on post-secondary education, the COVID-19 induced move to online education at all levels during the past few months has underscored the importance and the unsustainability of areas that lack broadband access to education at all levels, including elementary levels, as we heard on NBC this morning's news segments. This will definitely require partnerships that are new to the NSF and we think to the broader enterprise. The US simply has to compete and to collaborate to maintain and this will require some collaborations to expand them as we can to remain the global leader in S&E research and to continue to provide the seed corn for innovation. In this era in which many more countries are investing in their S&E enterprises, we are committed to modeling the core values of scientific integrity in all that we do as a continuing guiding factor. We expect objectivity, honesty, openness, fairness, accountability, and stewardship of the funds that we are providing. We believe that openness and high ethical standards in S&E are critical to fostering engagement among like-minded partners throughout all parts of the enterprise. As part of setting the standard on values, the US research enterprise must do more to create a welcoming and inclusive culture. At the same time, NSF strategic planning needs to be increasingly taken into account the S&E global developments and the activities of other NSF-like funding institutions around the globe. It is indeed crucial that we enhance our capacity to look outward to ensure that NSF's offerings are comparable to peer agencies abroad and to avoiding the US being technologically surprised. The NSB is strongly committed to developing and expanding NSF strategies and partnerships to grow the collaborations that we talk about and to ensure that we are a reliable partner on the global stage. It's not always been the case. And in the coming years, we look forward to working with the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics to obtain more data about the importance of these international collaborations and to have sort of intel on what's happening in as many sectors as we can. We simply will not be the world leader in all areas. In those areas that we do not lead. We need to maintain a knowledge in order to grow into leadership areas in areas of science that we currently are sparse in. So we need more data on international collaboration and on global talent flow. We know it's important. I've appreciated being part of the Dean's outside advisory group. We see that what all MSU is doing. These are just a few of the roadmap actions on the vision. We hope very much that you have or will look at the roadmap in its entirety, because we want and need your feedback. We at the NSB are happy to answer any questions you have either today or through my email address, which is rbeachy@wustl.edu. And we'll welcome comments and feedback. And I'll end my presentation there. And if it's okay, I'll switch immediately over to Sean's to see if to see what the director had. As I mentioned earlier, the director of the new director of the NSF has moved to the strategy to implement some of the courses of the NSB. And I hope that the presentation, while there will be some duplications, is not onerous. I'll try to move through it quickly if that's okay with you, Phil.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Roger.
I'm not sure how this next one shows. I mean, it's showing the entirety of the PowerPoint. This is a PDF rather than a PowerPoint presentation. Can you see the full screen size there?
It shows the side panel as well.
Okay, I don't know how to do that with a PDF any better. Does anybody else know how to remove margins here?
I think you go to slideshow and then scroll down to the bottom.
Hang on, slideshow for this. I don't, does the PDF have a slideshow function?
I actually, Roger, think that we're still seeing your presentation.
You shouldn't. Let's see if I can get rid of that. If I get that out of the screen, can you see what are you seeing now?
The last, yeah, it's the vision for the future, the last.
Okay, so you're not seeing this. How can I hand this back? I'm gonna
maybe unshare.
I'm gonna stop share and then go back again. Is that what I should do? Thank you very much. You guys are way better than I. These things, let's see what this one does. What do you see now?
NSF strategy.
Cool. All right, that's what you should see. So let me make it as big as I can and go from there. Is that all right? Is that relatively full screen? All right. So this is what I've heard Ponch give this several times, and it's what Sean Jones would have shown, and talks about the strategy into the future and strengthening both speed and scale of implementation of roadmap items. So you'll recognize part of it. You know what the NSF mission is: promote the progress of science, secure the national defense, prosperity, and so forth. It's not new. Since its founding, the NSF should fund high-risk, high-reward research that would seed growth across the entirety of the U.S. enterprise. And that came from the Endless Frontier, which was developed by Vannevar Bush nearly 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago now. The history is that NSF has sponsored a variety of change over the years. You notice in the 50s of talent development to broadening scope and so forth. The demonstration of impact, of course, part of that is the founding of Google and everything that led up to it. Large network development, and more recently in implementing its 10 big ideas. So the goal is to continue that change and adaptation in the next decades as well. Last year, the NSF hosted a celebration of the 70-year anniversary. I hope, and I will be around for the 75th, which should be even better. Knock on wood, that is, if I don't go skiing again. Let's see, and you see there the faces of a variety of and those who have been former presidents and directors rather of the NSF. I think all of the surviving directors showed up for that celebration, and it was wonderful to get their feedback on what they see for the future of the NSF and of the need of science and education in the U.S. workforce and development. Much of what the NSF does, what we do rather as the NSB, is to provide insight to Congress We are allowed to promote NSF perhaps more than the NSF itself can do because of congressional or limitations on what a civil servant can provide. But as you know, the committee has heard testimony from the former director. This interaction of the director and his administrative management staff is really crucial to providing Congress with input, but also to hear congressional feedback. And that feedback changes every 2 years based upon who's there, who's in power in committees, as you all know, and we try to listen as much as possible. This vision that I talked about is something that now Punch is using as demonstration that the board as well as NSF are listening to the science committees. We actually, after all, have the privilege of defining what much of what we do, the activities that's done, is not mandated by Congress for the most part, though in human resources, there is a strong mandate to develop talent. And that's congressionally mandated and it's described, but not in such detail that the NSF has to listen to individual senators as it might happen in the NIH and in some respects, even in NIFA, which I helped to direct a few years ago. The vision of innovation, or the vision, is to build on innovation, and that's to be ensured through partnerships, advancing frontier of science, and ensure accessibility to and inclusivity to industry. This is a defining moment because competition has changed, as one of those slides I showed you earlier showed. We are not the sole participant in global leadership in science. You only have to look at where science and research papers are coming from. We also know that there's what's called the missing million or the absent millions in the workforce. And there's a growing bipartisan support, has maintained rather a bipartisan support for the NSF in Congress. And we're fortunate to have that. Elsewise, we would have lost support in this past administration. Congress demanded that we stay strong. Part of it developing and advancing the frontiers of science is to recognize how we need to change. And this is providing new opportunities, creating research centers. One of the things that this new director said is there should be a research center or hub in every region and perhaps in many states, using AI in every state, making it accessible. And that includes broadband, being resilient in the face of change. Congress has provided the buffer between the administrative team and the agency. And that balance has led to an enablement of focus in new areas of science, biotech and bioeconomy, learning every place around the globe, and making sure that we empower as well as have curiosity-driven research from both the academics and public sector. So the NSF sees partnerships as important. And these benefits are clear to all of us that have been engaged in academic research. They should be clearly aligned, though, in value propositions and weighing both costs and risks and focusing on outcomes, whether that's in educational impacts on innovation or in discovery. Remember the goal to always to meet the national needs. You can create the national needs through discovery, but often the filter between what is truly most valuable and less valuable needs to be ascertained, perhaps a bit more diligently than we have, so that we focus on our funding on these opportunities that come through discoveries. So the direct partnerships that we have had, that we've seen, have been some with industry and some with foundations. There's been a paucity, we think, of co-engagement with other federal agencies. We lead discovery, then hand off to the NIH or to other agencies for follow-through. But there are other ways that we could make those bridges more effective so that the NSF knows more about what the needs are of the mission agencies and is able to perhaps address more effectively the underlying science that would enable the mission agencies to do their job more effectively. While we've had some interaction with state and municipal governments, they're certainly not enough. And we see this precipitous decline in state support of institutions as a real challenge for education and innovation around the country. And the NSB is really wants to work more effectively with municipal and local institutions to see what we can do to help there. I mean, the link between innovation, science and discovery with innovation is so clear, yet states fail so often to recognize how much of their enterprise depends on NSF and funds the bridges between what NSF might do and what industry needs is just dramatic. And it's different in some states. Look, you only have to look at the far south and southeast to realize how poorly prepared some states are. And they have failed to innovate, to invest, as have other more privileged states. Let's look at the investment that they've made in the East Coast and in California and other places to see the difference on a per capita basis of what's invested in translation or in, not always in support for institutions, but in outcomes from research. Those together must be part of the partnership that the NSB and the NSF see. Those partnerships can be catalyzed by NSF, but they're often led through academic institutions. And how we can facilitate better partnerships is part of what we want to do. If we can't engage directly through NSF with a major foundation, perhaps we can engage through this route instead. But we think there needs to be more engagement of these other components of the ecosystem if we're to be truly successful in 2030. Interagency partnerships are important. The Arctic program, for example, is partnered with many different federal agencies to great benefit. We are still the leaders in Antarctic. We're maybe not in Arctic anymore, but in the Antarctic we still are. Now, those partnerships are crucial, and sometimes they're made directly between agencies, but often facilitated by researchers who find bridges that might not be evident to the management of an agency. Many industries are partnered with NSF. Are they the best? Are they being used the most effectively? Could they be expanded? We need more partnerships. We see that there should be roles, including for these in these groups. We're continued to be concerned about K through 12. How do we get better partnerships so that the discoveries of how education is done, how education can be researched, and the outcome of that research, how it can be used to expand and stabilize and grow the impacts in K through 12. It's amazing to me how much research money we've spent on education research and how little adaptation of those findings go into education. We don't know why. We need to find out why that's occurring, because we're still as illiterate in science across the country as we were 45, 50 years ago. We've had this baseline of 25% sort of literate in science or claim literacy. Well, now there's another 15% that claim literacy that aren't, but we haven't built beyond the 25% foundational that we need if we're going to build the enterprise. So people, and there's talent everywhere. We need to find, we simply need to discover it in areas that we have not searched and developed in the past. This is a slide I showed earlier about the missing millions. It's not the right word perhaps, but it shows us that we're missing an enormous amount of talent, especially in the African-American community. We simply have failed in so many ways and on so many levels. And we're not, and this is, as I said in my remarks, that this is not just concern of the NSB, but it is of industry, of government, and of locals. So why in the heck we don't do better needs to be understood, and we need to find not just a magic bullet. This is a system issue. It ain't one institution's problem. It's a system. And we need to know more about it before we know how to solve it. The STEM pathways and how we engage in HBCUs and HSIs and teacups and others, we simply can do better than we have. We've seen in this current administration a good support, a growing support for the HBCUs that needs to be a commitment needs to be made of the new administration as well. And the HSIs, for goodness sakes, the role of Hispanic science and individuals in our science is growing. It needs to grow more rapidly to adapt to the changing demographics. Translation is part of this whole system. Knowledge leads to action, and the NSF has a number of component things in its programs. Surprisingly to me, and this slide doesn't show, and I don't know why. I'm going to ask about this. Why isn't SBIR and STTR on there? Because they also are part of the action, which is mandated by congressional action and should be incorporated. These are very innovative programs. We think there's room for more, but and you'll see this as we talk about the importance of innovation from our research. Whether can we create another Bell Lab-like activity? How do we do that? What kind of collaborations are necessary to make that happen? And it's all around collaboration. Our young faculty, our students that we're training, all are experiencing the demand and the opportunities that come through collaboration that many of us in the older set don't recognize or didn't require as we were achieving tenure. But collaboration is the name of the game in so many areas of science, as we see in your own college. The opportunities are enormous and you've made use of them. There's more to be done, however. And how we think about all these things, whether we think about it only as innovation or data analytics or finding ways to be a global leader, what kind of infrastructure is necessary. Yeah, I won't get into our discussions of the NSP and how much these large facilities cost. You have one on your campus, maybe several. That's not the only way it should go. We don't want to strip away from individual grants either, but there is investment in infrastructure that's required. And then, but choosing the right infrastructure, how to keep it updated over the years, costs hundreds of millions of dollars, and making sure that we make the best use of the money. If in fact the Palmer, Schumer and Young bill that's been talked about for increasing the budget of the NSF, if that actually comes about, how do we use our money most effectively? What's the best use of any additional resources? How do you organize to use it more effectively, not just more of the same, but to meet the demands of Schumer, of what he's asking, is that we make more use of it to benefit the society that funds it, and to make sure that we're in the front of innovation. So all of these pieces, ending with outreach, how do we show the public what we do to make sure that they understand the importance of congressional action that provides more resources to us? That's your job in state area. How can the NSB help? And how can we be better as an NSF society, funded society than we have been in the past? All right, my voice is shot and I have not provided myself with a glass of water, but I've got enough voice back at last. I'll turn it back to you, Phil.
Thanks, Roger, much appreciated. So, well, not very nice talks, very nice talks. So we're running out of time. I wonder.
Oh, geez, did I go? Oh, Lord, I'm down to 12 minutes. Okay.
We'd like to ask some questions. Would you have time to stay a bit longer?
Absolutely, yes. I can.
Okay,
I think I have nothing following. Yes, please.
So we'll prioritize those who have to run off, and I'm assuming Doug will have to run off since his life is extremely busy. So, Doug, if you have a question, do you want to start off the questioning?
Thank you, Roger. Yes, I do. I think the striking to me in your talk was about our success has been driven by being the place where the best minds want to come and work. And I think that has been the key to our success in the post-war world. Today, there are currents that sort of run counter to that, which I think are, one, putting students and faculty, foreign-born faculty at in a very difficult place. And so that's this trend toward concern about foreign influence in research. And clearly there's a balancing act that has to be done. But what do you see as the way that we can work our way through this very great challenge?
Yes, that's a great question, Doug. And there are two things that we are really concerned. Our major concerns in the National Science Board are talent and translation. The talent piece, because translation can't happen without talent. You can't do that on the backs, and history has shown that we have not been very good at doing this on the backs of our own people in our own locations. We simply haven't developed the kind of talent, nor have we maintained this innovative spirit that we see in first-generation immigrants. We recognize the importance of that, especially in Silicon Valley. We must do better about innovation and encouraging innovation in our own citizenry and those who immigrate prior to education. But being the magnet to attract the brightest and the best across the globe has been a key to success of our economy, and there's just no doubt about it. You only have to look at the numbers of physicians and scientists that have been talked about in public news organizations during this pandemic. Many of these are Asian born, or from other demographic groups. This is a global economy and a global problem. And science in its globality requires a breadth of skills. This has been on, it's the number one item that we hit the OSTP director with in this administration. He recognizes it. He recognizes the barriers that he faces. And we see that our role at the NSB must be in Congress to make sure that this attitude changes. We already know it's going to. I advise several companies, small companies, and the major challenge there is talent in certain specific types of areas that talent that we don't have in the U.S. or don't train well enough in. And our best candidates are not always American born. So and the inability to translate an O visa to their green card and so forth has been a real hazard. So it is the number one issue, Doug, that the board has taken on, along with, of course, broadening our own influence in getting access to the underrepresented groups and making work conditions better for everyone. One of the concerns that we have, Doug, is that we get people into science and lose them in our educational systems, and trying to find ways to understand why we lose them, whether it's lack of incentives, poor salaries for postdocs or graduate students when they see their fellows getting jobs in the economy for at 3 times what we pay our graduate students. It's not a good incentive to go to graduate school. So we need to understand that more, but we need also to and make sure that salaries are elevated to a place that people stay in them. Some of us got into science and stay in it because of the love and didn't care. We didn't care what we got paid 50 years ago. It's now not the same economy. It's not the same expectation. In fact, when I took my first position at Washington U, I took the lowest salary job I was offered, knowing where my opportunity, it didn't matter. I wanted to be there. It's different because of the way families now are operating. Anyway, sorry I went on so long, Doug, but you get a sense that that's important to us.
Thanks, Roger. And there's a question in the chat from Barunda.
I actually was going to ask my question live. It's related to the conversation you were having about needing to revisit training models, but also this hastening the transition from lab to practice. And part of that means we'd have to rethink the way that we train graduate students and postdocs, and also the ways in which some of the funding models, including those that come out of NSF for training grant programs, measure success in terms of whether those students and postdocs enter into traditional careers or stay in academia. And so it sounds like there's some implications there for our training models and how we measure success. And I just wondered if you could share some of your thoughts or maybe conversations that have happened around that.
Yes, and because the vision was developed with a lot of SEI indicators, sort of science and engineering indicators data, we probed deeper into those data to sort of understand the expectations and why in the past we focused so much on academic futures for our graduate students instead of the reality of life, which is that only 20% of us, only 20% of the graduate students will accede to an academic or want an academic atmosphere, all the way to the nature of how training is done, as you said. Innovations are not as encouraged in graduate school. We're not encouraged in graduate school or in my tenure at Washington U. Only when I got to Scripps was I really encouraged to be innovative and to look for new ways to get my research out into the atmosphere, beyond the laboratory. It's driven by institutional commitment. Washington U has changed over the years, as have most institutions, where we expect more for translation. And educating and informing and providing opportunities for graduate students and undergraduates to participate in industry-sponsored research or in partnerships or internships is crucial to getting that exposure. In some fields, we have here in St. Louis, there is like in your area, a junior college junior college provides training in a biotech program, since that's my space. And every single one of those 2-year associate degrees gets hired months before they get their degree. It's knowing what your skill set is and where your industry is, and finding ways to get it enabled. On the other hand, if biotech is not in your space, but you know it is in Chicago or in Boston, finding ways to link students to those opportunities before they graduate will get more in. And the tech industry in general is more mobile than perhaps biotech is, certainly biotech is. But there are ways to do better than we have. We learned from the dean's advisory meeting about some of the opportunities being provided, and Phil and I have talked about the importance of growing those, because that's what we need to. That's our service. That's our service to society as much as anything. Finding ways that our students are successful, but it'll take different models, because no single model fits all. And if we don't find a good way to reach out, we'll find ourselves focused in a specific topic area, which doesn't achieve the need for breadth and understanding, a broader context in which a single discipline is focused. I mean, the biology as a background is great, but it's not as good if it doesn't have chemistry and biochemistry and physics and mathematics and economy. How do you get that all into a student curriculum? What is it that creates a breadth of understanding that a student can move from just one to another discipline or to another one? And providing that opportunity is more than classwork. It's hands-on, it's minds-on focus of how you do it. So it's been a real concern, Burunda, is that correct? Sorry, nice name. And then we've tried to find ways to suggest that the agency can be more engaged there. Remember, the board, in many ways, the board is now moving more rapidly in goal forming than is the agency. The agency is huge, and it's a bottoms-up organization. So it responds to what scientists say should be done or educators say should be done. Is that the sole model for NSF? I mean, what role does Congress have in setting vision and mission? We've not allowed them at all, but we are reminded that we are taxpayer funded. So there's an awareness that the agency needs to change. And this director it will help to move slowly, though, the agency to where we think it needs to be by 2030. So it's a good time for us to be engaged for several reasons. One, Congress really is concerned about competition from China and from other parts of the globe. That's helpful and led to the Schumer-Young bill. Will it be implemented in this era when we have trillions of dollars of debt that have been needed to keep our economy at least somewhere stable in this pandemic? What will happen? We don't know, but the NSB is really concerned about the issue you raised, the one that Doug raised, and others, and how we can help Congress stay focused on the need for more funding, growing funding, not redirecting it.
Thanks, Roger. There's a different question in the question and answer, and it goes like this. While I hear a lot that NSF wants high risk, high reward research, my experience is that it is rarely funded, as the panelists and program managers are very conservative in what is
Bingo.
funded.
Boy, are they correct. Sorry, go ahead.
So is there any way this can be handled in an effective manner?
There are several ways that we've talked about. I'm not prepared to give any clues about where we're taking that discussion, but absolutely yes. It's been called for years. This is not the first vision document to say we need more blue sky research. The question is, how do you choose those which are most likely to succeed? And how do you link the success of a high risk to the follow-on? Because the high risk is high risk until it's not. And then if it's useful, it needs to be further fostered before it becomes relevant. So the board is focused on that whole issue of how do you choose those really great ideas? Where do you bet? And do you accept a 10% winning of good ideas that leads into something, or do you want to aim higher? So there's that balance. It's the same as any private company, what you invest in and what's worth the investment. And in some cases, not always are the bright ideas developed enough to know what the possibilities are. So we're asking for better understanding through our broader impacts statements. Do a better job of telling us about it. And then that helps the agency to know where best to invest. But we are part of the Schumer-Young bill. If it comes through, you can be assured that that's a component that we like to see expanded.
Thank you. And I think, Eric, you were next up.
Yeah, thank you for a really interesting talk, Roger. And I guess I want to follow up a little bit on some of the things you've already touched on, which is the funding aspect. So much of what you would like to do, talks about the importance of funding, the improved infrastructure, the additional resources for translational research, things like that. And I think back to about 20 years ago when NIH had the very successful push for doubling the budget, and over the years similar sorts of pushes have been made for NSF, but it doesn't seem like they've had that same success, despite the fact that it always seems like it has bipartisan support, and yet it just doesn't seem to come through. And I'm just kind of wondering if you see, you've talked about it, I guess, a little bit with some of the, changing the world, but do you think now it might actually come through, and what can we do, to kind of help the legislatures, whatever, see the importance that the basic research brings, so that we can, sort of get that, the increased funding that is so desperately needed, as you pointed out.
Yeah, yes, that's a great question, Eric, and one that I think really bears understanding several things. One, as a consequence of Congress seeing the challenge that's coming through China and how they do things, and our concern, U.S. concern for security of breakthrough science and development of our own industry based upon discoveries made here. There's been a real awareness that we have not kept track, we have not kept pace with the expansion, whether it's in the fundamental sciences, in food and agriculture, or in health. They have a top-down model that says that we need this, and these are the resources we're going to invest to get to there. Our bottoms-up approach is more diffuse to Congress. You can say what great research you're doing, but unless you talk about it or show outcomes, it doesn't mean anything. The numbers of people that know what NIH means and what NSF means is dramatically different. They tell their stories on a daily basis. We tell our stories quietly, and somebody makes a ton of money at Google or at the enterprises that we enable. But the track through from the original discovery to the enterprise is lost. And certainly the name NSF never shows up in Google's website. It says funded by enabling research in the 80s and 90s by the NSF. I mean, we don't NSF until our last, till this board came along, said, didn't even have a sign on its big facilities that said sponsored by NSF. Do you have one on the facility? I hope the heck that you have labeled the facilities at Michigan State that are NSF sponsored as being NSF sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
Bring awareness. The second is to make sure that you recognize this when you talk to reporters about what you do, why you do it. You know, it's very easy for a medical researcher to say, I'm going to solve cancer. Well, which one? Okay, and 20 years later, we finally say, what cancer? And then we say, what are we doing in that cancer? Then we say, oh, by the way, we affect another. So they've been talking about it for 50 years since the war on cancer started. We don't have a war on anything. We have a desire to learn things and to provide new enabling knowledge. So telling our stories better has always been a problem at the NSF. I'm on a group that is looking to, it helps to increase the sponsorship of USDA fundamental research called, in the program that I led called AFRI. And SOAR, which I helped to start after I left the leadership of AFRI, has now helped to triple AFRI budget in the last decade by telling stories. And they tell stories in ways that the NSF doesn't do it. We are now recognizing that they're not doing a very good job of selling themselves. And so part of what you just asked, Eric, is to make sure that Congress knows and has these days of understanding and knowing about NSF-sponsored science, which has gone on in different societies, but following through with what it does and how it impacts means a lot to Congress. And we have to do a better job. We've said that for the last 2 decades. We know what the limitations, where we're lacking, but unless you all on the front lines of who receive NSF support talk about it on a daily basis and the people you talk to, it will filter up very, very slowly. Got to increase the rate of knowledge. And then when you go to see your congressman, when whoever represents you, make sure that you don't just talk about whoever, that they take scientists with them to the hill, of course. But not only do you talk about how many great PNAS papers or Cell or Science or Nature, the one-namers, right? The one-word journals, not just those, not just the discoveries, but what the heck it means. And how close you are to a solution to drought tolerance in maize or in brown beans or for the discovery of the next quasar or what's beyond them. And why it's important. What does it mean? Why are you doing all that work at Michigan State? Who are you collaborating with? Because those collaborations between you and some other state mean even if the grant goes to that other state, some of that money comes to us. I mean, we got to do a better job, period. Schumer recognized it, put that bill out. That's the first time that's happened. That somebody in an important position in Congress said, we're behind. Mm-hmm. You notice that often in my remarks, I talked about a global leader. I didn't say the global leader. We've had the privilege of being the global leader in so many things. We are no longer the global leader in everything. I'd argue that the chemistry in Germany has been better than the chemistry in the US for decades. Why did that happen? Why did Washington U lose its biochemistry leadership when Stanford grew up and bought everybody away? Why didn't they rebuild it? So these are institutional decisions. They are, and we can't let a decline happen. And when you do, then you have faced the issues that we have now. We have not doubled the budget in a decade at NSF. Schumer is willing to help us get there with the $10 billion over 5 years. How do you make sure that your congressmen know that's bloody important? Mm-hmm. For economy, for education, to improve America's standard of living into the future? Convincingly, not just give me more money or just give my institution more money. This is for America. This ain't for the institution. This is for America.
Yeah, very good points. Communications is weak from the science world. We've just got to get out.
And we've known it, Phil. We've known it.
Yep.
And do you decide tenure based upon service to community? I mean, these are institutional challenges.
Yeah.
And tenure ain't the same as it was. It shouldn't be the same as it was when I was getting tenure.
Yep.
You know, when I got tenure, it didn't matter. I celebrated about a day, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I said, what's the next thing I want to do?
Yeah.
So
there's a question in the chat. This is from John Vivanka in engineering. And he asks, given Panch's expressed interest in impact versus translation, is there any visibility for how that will be implemented throughout NSF, including interagency partnerships?
No, not yet. These are part of the roadmap. And the board is a governing board. It's not an operational board. And so our goal is to advise. Our role is to advise, and we can advise in different ways. But certainly the partnerships, Punch has made in his first 3 months, has now met with every agency head, research agency head, at least once. He's developing a roundtable to help this become a more frequent event, so that there is more likelihood of interagency collaborations. So that, I mean, NSF sponsors, it was the only, I mean, it sponsors great engineering research, as you know. I mean, and being from the science side rather than the engineering side per se, though I am a genetic engineer, I didn't realize how important NSF was to engineering, and how much engineering has contributed to the translational side of NSF, and finding ways to marry the fundamental sciences in other areas to translation is key. And this is where Panch comes from. If you know his history at Arizona State and what happened, what he brought about at Arizona State University in terms of translation and in training and cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary training that far preceded anybody else trying to do it. You get a sense of where Panch wants to take the organization, how he wants to see the organization evolve. But you should also not miss the fact that Panch is committed to fundamental science. We're not going to lose that in any new initiative. I mean, we just can't. So how do you add on to it? It's going to take more resources to do it. And so our goal is to tell Congress that we've got great research. We need to maintain that research. We need to find ways, though, to fuel new activities that come from our research. So don't lose the best of what you've got. Mm-hmm. But find ways to expand it so that it has a greater impact and to show that impact to society, which those have been missing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. So I guess, Angela, you're up next.
Great. Thank you. Roger, thanks so much for sharing with us today. Very much appreciate it. I really appreciate your comments in regards to NSF not really communicating to the public in terms of what they've done through the years. I was so frustrated with that while I was at NSF. I mean, there needs to be even something on their front website in terms of all the contributions they made. Their videos are great, but most people aren't going to necessarily go to their website and look for the videos, even though they're there, and get to them. And every single division should do that as well. But I think at universities, one of the things we need to be doing is making sure that every single one of our graduate students can talk about their research in terms of general terms acceptable to the public. I went through over 5,000, 6,000 proposals while I was at NSF. Yeah. And I would say 85% of scientists cannot write that one paragraph where they explain their research to the public. And that is supposed to be searchable by the public and understandable by the public. So I think we need to do a lot more there. But it was interesting. In 2018, I went to talk to a senior member of the House. He is not on the chemistry caucus. He's on the pharmaceutical caucus. So he does have a science background, but he was not aware in 2018, that was the first year that China's investments in science surpassed that of the US. And they are on the exponential increase. And I'm excited about the Schumer-Young proposition, but with all that's going on now, I really find that's going to be quite challenging to get through. And I remember Fleming Krim always used to say flat is the new doubling. And he's been, and that's been over a dozen years. I mean, obviously there's been a lot more investments because of COVID, but how are we not going to go back down to those levels? I mean, you know.
Yeah,
And you know, when I talked to our legislator for you know, the Ingham County area, and you know, I went to see her in DC in January, and she had said her brother's a scientist, and she said, you know, she said science is now considered a special interest. This was pre-COVID, and that, you know, that there just, you know, there were enough members of the House who really didn't feel necessarily that science needed to be a priority. And she said it was so important for more scientists to be going to the Hill.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is now the new Sputnik opportunity in our mind. And how we keep the excitement flowing is really critical. We've had, as I understand, 20% more of the new undergraduate admittances now want to be involved in the healthcare industry as a consequence of of SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. And the discoveries, the realization that you really can develop an effective vaccine in less than a year as a consequence of what science has contributed. I mean, I was privileged to be at Scripps for 10 years, and the RNA technology, synthetic nucleotides for stability of RNA, and the vectors for delivering DNA vaccines, live DNA, were pioneered there. And I had the privilege of watching my colleagues with this stuff. And now in 2019, it created what it did today. What's going on at Oxford, what's going on around the globe in RNA vaccines. Otherwise, we're stuck with dead viruses, and that takes a hell of a lot longer, and you got to prove yourself more. So, I mean, it's exciting times, and those who want to do discovery research should find that in climate change, should find it in sustainability, should find it in biodiversity. I mean, the excitement opportunities, if expressed well, will lead, should be able to, in my naivete, continue based on what the challenges of COVID-19 have done. And it's our goal. We have to show this as instructors I mean, we can no longer afford just to say my science is great, and I'm going to train 2 graduate students, one to replace me if I die, and the other to fill a position at a small university, Grinnell College or whatever. And that's not enough. If you're not embedding the drive and the reason for science, the excitement of science, then you shouldn't have a grant, in my opinion. And it's up to the NSF to figure out how to do this, because they're the funders of this. And this we're talking now about the economic future long after I'm gone. So what is it that we can do? Otherwise, we will become a service industry country like England. And but how do you do it in engineering and revitalize manufacturing again? How do you do it in sustainability or in synthetic biology to make a better economy for the farmers or for the pharmaceutical industry, whatever? Why we haven't been able to get more attention, I think is our fault, and we have to do it better. Yeah, Angela, we wanted more, and it's time that there be more, because more is expected. More is expected, more by those who fund us.
So Roger, if I may, I've recently been elected president-elect of the American Chemical Society, largest.
Oh, you have? Oh, congratulations. Yeah.
So I just had a conversation with the head legislative person there. I am happy if ACS can be of any assistance, because my top priority is on legislative and budgeting. So if there's any way we can help with NSB or whatever, please let me.
Let me just say that the health industry has got their act together. All the different institutes, everybody says we need more research for health. But the chemists say we need more research for chemistry. The plant biologists say we need more research for discovery and agriculture. The food scientists say it for their field. The engineering and packaging departments say it for their, I mean, You go down the line and it's all self-serving. NSF is for the well-being of the American public and health. We need to be about the business of ensuring the economy and the well-being of family or of whatever. But this is a unification time. It's not a time to break apart into further into our associations. But for our associations, this isn't NSB speaking here. This is Roger Beacky speaking. So I apologize to those who wanted to hear NSB. But I think we recognize that this is about the economy and about people's lives, just as much as it is in the health community. But when we break apart into associations and say that ours is more important than that one, it doesn't help.
We've been coming together.
Good.
Yes.
So thanks. Thanks for staying on. And there's a couple more questions if you have time to hear them.
Yeah, the only thing I'm ready for is lunch and a cappuccino.
That's
I'm
good.
Fine. Let's go ahead, Phil.
So there's a couple of questions about education. And the first, and I'll read them both and you can answer both at the same time, I think. So much, this is from Christopher Riemann, so much of the Vision 2030 and beyond seems predicated on the identified goal of increasing time on science in elementary grades. Given the decentralized nature of US education, what strategies has the board discussed in encouraging such a shift in instructional time? And then the second question from Barbara Schneider is, thank you for a great talk. Given your comments about K-12 science, including the current performance of US students, were there specific recommendations or ideas about what should be happening in this sector?
Yeah, boy, those are both really good questions and something that we struggle with because while our focus is on science and STEM, there's also this recognition that science serving society needs to know society, and that's not always coming through in STEM. So in STEM education, unless we find ways to ensure that science in society is part of it, and you have to understand society to know where science in society should be. So it's a little harsh. On the other hand, since we are a science-based agency and education of science, teachers and science curriculum and in the education research support, shouldn't be a surprise that we think that science, which is the underlying part of almost entirety of our economy and human endeavor, is someplace underlined by mathematics or physics or science of some sort. It shouldn't be a surprise that it's there. But we also know through the experiences that we've had this year in COVID, education doesn't stand alone without human contact. It doesn't do very well. So one of the things in the K-12 research that we do is trying to evaluate, as I mentioned earlier, how does what we fund get implemented, and are we funding the right kind of education research? Is it too narrow? Is it broadly and not broad enough? What can we as a board do to encourage the sections in the social sciences and education be more impactful, if you like? And I think it's so part of our frustration of science not leading. I mean, of K-12 not being as preparatory as we'd like it to be. So I apologize for not having a better answer, except that, as I mentioned earlier, K-12 is certainly the underlying component. How much is ours to do? What kind of collaboration should we be doing with the Department of Education? And is there something that we could do better at NSF to engage more with other agencies that also are involved in education, whether it's the USDA or the DOE or others? Everybody's got a little piece, but that's not coordinated. That we don't see any way of coordination so far. And we're encouraging the NSF to take a leadership role in bringing together other educational, from other agencies to see if there's not a way of coordinating in ways that have not been done before. That works across departments and divisions, and there's a lot of egos in every one of those. And it's not hard, it's not easy. But our role as a board is to encourage new things to ensure preparedness. So we're not shy, and we'll be more bold than we have in the past about helping try to bring about some of those changes.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for all the great questions. And Roger for staying on 25 minutes beyond, so that's a lot of overtime there.
Yeah, right. It's been a pleasure. Phil, I appreciate being on the advisory board, but also an opportunity to speak to people that you brought together for that and signed on to this. I understand we had a reasonable audience to start with in size. So,
Yeah.
And if others see it, I hope it's useful. And I hope that it gives a clue to the university, this university and the university that I attended, to see how they might adapt, perhaps knowing what the vision is, and being as proactive as you can in Washington, and preparing your faculty to prepare your students more effectively so that they are successful in whatever they do. That's the goal that we have as universities, right?
Yep, absolutely. And the communications part is, that's clearly a big piece we don't do well.
And we don't give credit for it. So why should you do it? Yep. So, I mean, there is credit to be given, and we rely so much on good teachers and changing of models. I love what you're doing in the STEM building and bringing new ways of teaching chemistry, new ways of teaching physics to make sure that you don't lose that numbers that are going to other places because they other careers because they think it's more easier or easier to make more money or how to live well. Why aren't there more African Americans that are PhDs? I knew one or two in my whole career as I came through. And it's just, we had the same problem when I had a training grant out at Scripps for Latinos, and we worked with the Los Angeles community colleges and universities. But you have to understand the societies. Why is it that you do or do not enter in science? What is society, their place? Not what we say they should be, but Hispanic population is a family born and doesn't want to move very far away from where they've been. How do you take it to them? I mean, understanding more of who we serve, not having them think that our way is the only way, because it isn't.
Right.
All right, enough talking. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everybody on the panel and everybody for being here. And have a great rest of your day.
And you guys too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.